Hi, and welcome to the Sales RX podcast. We provide actionable insights for revenue professionals looking to find the right prescription in their sales process. So let's jump right in. Hello, and welcome to all my Sales RXers and first-time listeners to the Sales RX podcast. I'm your host and your sales doctor, Chet Lovegren, bringing you a brand new episode on this Wednesday afternoon. We're talking about onboarding, training, and ramping as a sales rep. And my guest today is none other than Troy Barter. Troy is a 5-time sales leader, 3-time SaaS sales leader. He's also a top TikTok and LinkedIn sales content creator with some great insights that he posts on both platforms. And I must say, he's also got the best beard in the sales game. Troy, thanks for joining us today. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Working on the beard. It's a work in progress, man. We're not. You haven't quite seen my final form, but we're getting there. It's a far cry from the days when you had to be clean shaven to come to work, right? Which is a beautiful thing, man. But I know we've been on TikTok lives together and everything, and appreciate you having me on, man.
Yep, really excited to have you. I think this is a really important topic because whether you're a first-time SDR or you're an SDR time 2, or an AE, full cycle AE, you've probably onboarded somewhere before. If it's your second time onboarding in sales, I know things can kind of be muddied together, and there are definitely goods and bads about companies onboarding programs. And I think there's just more things that we can take in terms of control. And so I want to kind of talk about that today. But before we do, tell us a little bit about the story of Troy Barter. How did he go from where he is today to owning his own consulting company and being the VP of sales at Rental-Matics?
Yeah, man. So I got my start in sales, actually just selling beats online. It's not a secret anymore, which I tried to keep it for a lot of my tech sales career, that I was a rapper. I was a battle rapper. I was in King of the Dot, Grind Time, iBattle. I did it at a fairly high-ish level. And in the early 2000s, started making beats online, which back then it was SoundClick, and started to sell them to people and realized like, oh, all these rappers, like their email is on their SoundClick. Like I have this list of artists and I have all their emails. Like I don't have their phone number, but like, man, I could start getting them, emails and ask for their instant messenger handle, take it to instant messenger, chat back and forth, come up with a time-based incentive to get them to buy. And it's like all little things that were just kind of instinctual, shit that I never really learned. I was like, man, this is like sales. Like I should look into this as a job really, which I'd never thought of before. And, the only sale I knew of was car sales. So I leapt into car sales. I remember telling them like, hey, if I could make $3,000 a month doing this, like I'm ready to make the jump today, like to the big bucks, 36 grand a year. And they're like, dude, that's going to be easy for you. Did pretty well at that. Worked at a few different dealerships. Did not like working Saturdays. Bell to bell in the car business is a bitch. 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. After you were out all night on Friday is rough for sure. Moved over to what I thought was going to be marketing, like a marketing job. Turned out that wasn't real. It was a door-to-door independent corporate licensee company. You can be your own boss type deal. Where I did well, learned a lot, made a little, and I was one of the top ranked reps in the country, but no one makes money in those. It's 100% commission based. Parlayed that to another door-to-door company where I became their national director of sales, had about 60 people under me, but still the money wasn't great at all. If people sold and had a good month, great. If they weren't allowed to knock doors in the suburbs of Chicago because, they didn't get their permit and everyone got kicked out of the area or whatever was going on at the day, you didn't make any money. So I made the leap into tech sales. Happened to know someone that I worked door-to-door sales with that was in tech sales. They worked at Fleetmatics, which was a SaaS company that sold GPS tracking to like plumbers, landscapers, people that had fleets of vehicles. Went in there and started as an SDR. So I recommend to a lot of people sometimes if you want to get into tech sales and you haven't done it before, you may have to start as an SDR and you might have to take a pay cut. Luckily, I actually didn't because the pay was so abysmal in door-to-door sales that even though I was technically crushing it, I had an org of 60 people, managers underneath me and everything. I was making less than what an SDR would make. So it was easy for me to just be like, all right, cool, I'm all in. I'll humble myself and be an SDR. Move from SDR to AE to director within a year. Was one of the company's top directors for years, and then I got acquired by Verizon for $2.4 billion. Let my stock vest, and then moved over to Panadoc, which is a competitor to DocuSign in the digital signature and proposal space. Lucked out twice. That one became a unicorn where it was valued at $1 billion as a private company. I had stock there as well, where now I am branching out, starting to consult. Training is definitely a topic that is near and dear to my heart because that's really what we're looking to do. A large function of what I'm looking to do with my company. And I'm VP of sales of Rentalmatics as well, which is a GPS tracking company. So it's not a tough sale for me because I've done it for a long time, and it's a bit of a no-brainer. These are companies that are they own rental cars. Let's say that they're a Hertz franchisee, for example. Maybe they have 5,000 rental cars. Chet, if you own 5,000 cars, would you want to know where they are all the time?
Oh, heck yeah.
Of course. Everyone would. Why don't they already have it? You would assume they all already do. They don't. So it's like, okay, I've seen that world happen and unfold before in the white van space, where it became a publicly traded company. It got acquired. This is very similar, but these companies are a little more old school and they're behind. And now it's time to adopt and begin to get that return. So it's a beautiful world. Yeah, so a lot on the plate for sure.
I love it. And that's actually something your background in making beats and selling them. I was very similar for a long time. I kept the fact that I live in Los Angeles. I kept entertainment covered up, but I did that for like 6 years, did stand up, did some commercials. People really took a deep dive. They would be able to find one or two, but I kept that covered up for a while. And it wasn't until this year I was like, you know what? Screw it. Like I'll let people know, like that's the background. That's the story. That's what got me here.
Yeah. So like, I guess it's a funny topic, right? Because why do people cover that up? Well, you can be fired. You can be fired for anything. You say one thing that's not in line with how corporate likes things to roll out, you're gone, right? Mm-hmm. So like for me, battle rapper in the early 2010s, not tough for me to get fired. I've had friends get fired for it, not very tough. And it's like, wait, you're playing Marshall Mathers LP. They're saying some words on here. When you play the uncensored, everyone's getting fired. What's going on here? And I just came to the conclusion myself, genuinely, if a company wouldn't have me for who I am and who I was in my journey, then fuck them. Yeah. I'd rather not work anywhere. And I'm never going to change that. Even if I would end up making less money with that being my approach, which I've found, it actually leads to avenues for more money because people are starved for people to actually be honest and real because it's gone. It seems like everything comes with a veneer of falseness in terms of the success you have, who you are as a person, and people are dying for anything that is an alternative to that. And I think that's why I've had early success at TikTok. I think that's why my LinkedIn tends to be successful. I don't really just toe the line of what everyone else is saying. I tell them what worked for me, and I don't even think that's the end all be all. There's no such thing as an end all be all in sales. But similar, man, you brought up the beard. I remember, you can look at photos from my first battle. I'm clean shaven in it. It's because I was driving up from Syracuse where the battle was to Rochester, which is where the training was at Paychex. And I could not have a beard. I had to have it shaved, and it does not look that cute under here, dude. It doesn't, it's not that great in my opinion. The jawline could use a little help, so it was like, man, this sucks. It's nice to see those things starting to loosen up on the side of how someone's appearance is, for sure. But it is very interesting. Someone with an axe to grind, if your life is out there a bit on the internet, even if you've learned from things, you're subject to get absolutely blown out of the water and have your life kind of ruined. So yeah, I just decided, fuck them, have at it. If that's the case, then maybe I wasn't meant to play ball with y'all if you don't want to play with me, And I think honestly, that's the right mindset to have.
Well, you hit on something important in culture. You'd rather have honest conflict than dishonest harmony. That's the reality.
Yeah, you know the deal, man. What's on every corporate credo? Be you, right? Be you.
Mhm.
No,
This is who
it's
I am.
never been be you. It's never been be you, and it never will be you. It's be what we want you to be. Man, I hope we hired the right person, because if your version of you isn't our version of what you should be, you're gone.
Mhm.
And that's every company I've ever come in contact with.
Mhm.
That's the reality, because things can get so loosely interpreted of like, well, now what you're doing or who you are doesn't jive with the other folks that are here. Well, it kind of goes both ways, does it not? Like, so it's interesting, man. I could definitely talk about it for 50 hours, but yeah, it's an interesting world that we're living in. And I think really at the end of the day, when change happens, it breeds opportunity for really everybody involved, because no one ever should want everything to be moving in one direction, one narrative, one method. Anytime that happens, people begin to starve for an alternative, originality, more candor. I think that really can apply to sales in general at this point, not just, building your own personal brand.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love how you hit on that piece about culture. And I think that's why today's conversation is so important when we talk about onboarding and training and ramping as a sales rep, because the culture of onboarding, especially in a Zoom world, which a lot of us live in, has become so cookie cutter.
Yeah.
It's one of the top questions I get from new reps at other companies that are pinging questions in Pavilion. Hey, I'm onboarding. Does this plan look right? Is there something I'm missing here? And they don't know any better, right? We as sales leaders are supposed to know better and supposed to actually put thought in our onboarding plan. I don't think it happens enough. And so give the listeners a high level overview, because obviously we could talk all day about the value of onboarding, but talk about the value of onboarding and reinforce what their goals should be when they are onboarding, whether they get a vanilla cookie cutter plan or they get a super in-depth, rigorous training process. Give the listeners your insight as a sales leader on what you should be accomplishing in onboarding and what the value of onboarding is.
It's funny, man. That like you told me that this was the topic like right before we hopped on, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit, because very very early stages, but I will 100% complete it and complete it quickly, because I've got a lot of material on it, working on a book for and kind of a model for exactly what you're describing, which is how do you get people to actually adopt a process. I see that there's like a million sales books that are out there on here's the new process to try. Here's the new strategy. Here's how you should do it. But I've seen those get rolled out from Challenger to Spin, which, by the way, I like elements of all of them. So I'm not saying either of these are bad, but they get rolled out, right? People see what it is, what you do in that model, and then they never really adopt it. Like it never gets really, you never see it to its full potential, almost never, because it's all in the, material of here's what it is. And it feels like there's a lot lacking on, well, here's how to check up on yourself. Here's how to consistently try to get better at the things that we're giving you. Here's how to make sure that they'll actually adopt it and the mindset that is required to have success, which I think is what is lacking the most when it comes to onboarding. I'd say the big things, if I was to give you like tenets of like how I like to do onboarding, the first one is do not worry about making them feel better if they fail. Don't plan for failure. This is my method for sales in general, by the way. Never plan for things to go wrong. Plan for everything to go perfectly, and sometimes it will, and then have contingency plans when it doesn't go perfectly. So what I see all too often is a lot of times when there's a trainer in the room and they've been hired internally, well, if you're training and you were hired internally, there's a fairly high chance it's because you were not the A player rep on the floor, because you would have made more money by not getting into training. Once in a while, there's an exception to that, but it's fairly rare. So I've noticed with a lot of those trainers, they get in with new reps and they feel like their first job is to make them feel better if it's slow going for them to get ramped up. Like, hey, it takes everybody a different amount of time. They want to preserve their feelings. They don't want them to quit. I don't want to set them up to feel better when they fail. I want to build them up to whip ass right out the gate. So I go in there and say, hey, guess what? That might happen. You're right. You also can whip ass immediately sometimes. And if you do all of these things, you can put yourself in the best position to do that. If you're setting people up with the expectation that there's a chance they'll fail and it might take a while, a lot of new reps, especially if they're not fully bought in, that's exactly what they're going to do in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, they ain't going to do shit, because you've already laid out that it could take a while. You gave them an excuse. You baked the excuse for them. So I like to plan everything towards perfection. I want to build the rep up. I want to instill confidence. What I think made me whip ass when I was at Fleetmatics is my director, his name is Travis Hulk. We worked together in door to door. Travis kicked ass at Fleetmatics, moved up to a director role. He became a director like a day or two, I think, before I actually came in as a rep, as an SDR. And Travis said to me, he was like, dude, you whipped my ass where we worked at before, and I'm crushing it here. I have no doubt that you'll kill it here. So he put it in my head that there's no way I would fail. I'm guaranteed to win. And it excited me, and I acted accordingly. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I had success is the fact that he's not a humble guy either, that he kind of humbled himself and built me up, and it inspired me to like put everything I had into it, change when I go to bed, change when I wake up, change all of my habits, like completely put everything I had into the opportunity. That's what I'm looking for when I first start training people. I want them fucking excited. It's not, hey, it's training. I want you in the right frame of mind first. Do you have one foot in your old job and their culture and one foot in the new one? If you still have that in the back of your head, like, oh, we didn't say that shit at my old job, I'm not sure. I need to find a way day one to get you to say, fuck that, I'm all in. This is it. There's no alternative for me. And there's just not much training out there that covers that, because it's kind of like the cringe thing now to be like a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
And also a lot of the qualities that I think I leverage in particular that instill that, like, you know, excitement in people might be looked at as more like, I don't know, too masculine or something. I don't like, you know, like, which I don't think really is the case. I think a lot of women like really like the content that I'm putting out as well. But, I think it's so important that you have reps bought in before you begin to train. You know, it's the same reason why when I do any kind of sale or I'm doing a demo, I actually do a couple of slides first, which I know a lot of people don't like a slide deck. But my goal in the slide deck is to anything that's weighing them down. Let's say that we're in a hot air balloon and there's a couple of anchors that are anchoring it to the ground. I need to snip what's anchoring it to the ground so we can take you all the way to the height of impulse where you'll buy. So I think of what are the things that might cause somebody to stay anchored when I take them through the demo. Well, if they don't believe that this shit's actually going to work, if they buy it, even if it looks good, then they're not going to be as impulsive as they could be. Let me show them a slide on that. You know, if they think, all right, yeah, this looks good, but who's to say that there's other companies that do better? You need a slide that puts you on equal footing so they don't think that you're operating out of the founder's garage. You know, it's little stuff like that. Like, you need to set the table and have them in the right state of mind to build up their impulse and to actually get them to pay attention. And to me, onboarding is the same thing. You know, I don't want to beat a dead horse too much, but onboarding and training should include building up some level of excitement and buy-in on the opportunity so they're motivated to learn. And I think that is wildly lacking right now.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I think it's thanks to the Grant Cardones of the world who have turned motivation into a $199 VIP sellathon seat that people now go, oh, I know what this is. Which is funny because I see every software company now talking about 10x your mindset and 10x your sales. He was talking about that in 2015. That's his trademark.
Dude, here's the thing. That 10x shit works. That's really kind of like, I'm not like I have a few Grant Cardone books back there and I haven't read them. I have listened to the audiobooks. But the reality is, if you have any goal and you say, what if I had to do 10 times this? What would I have to do? If you adhere to that, there's a pretty high chance you're going to hit that first goal. You have a better chance than you would have beforehand. And yeah, I do get a vibe hearing Grant, like he's trying to sell me something that I don't need. Like, there is that vibe to him, but like, I don't hate everything. And I think that's how it works with anyone. And like, I don't know if I said it to you because things melt together, but I was talking to, I think, someone earlier, and I said, like, you remember UFC in like the early 90s? Like I do, I'm 38, right? So when UFC first started in the mid 90s, it was, we have a karate guy and we have a jujitsu guy. which discipline is the best, because this is the only shit that either one of them can do. They put everything they had, all their eggs are in one basket. And it turned out, for the most part, jiu-jitsu was winning. There was, Hoist Gracie was whipping everybody's ass. It didn't make much of a difference if you were Tank Abbott and could bench 700 pounds and knock people out cold. Once he got you on the ground, it was over. And then they figured out, like, all right, well, let's learn jiu-jitsu too. Maybe we can't just swing hand, and that's it. And then, all right, wrestling, boxing. And the more that you added to your game, the better that you would get. And yeah, some of those practices, it's like, man, all that I'm learning from Steven Seagal is this one fucking front kick, which is what Anderson Silva supposedly learned. And he knocked somebody out in like 10 seconds from Steven Seagal. Grant Cardone has some shit too. And some of it is heat. And if you listen to his audiobook in particular, his tone's incredible. And there's something that you can pick up on that his persistence when talking one-on-one with a prospect does not come off as abrasive. It just comes off as, man, you got to admire this guy's persistence, if that makes sense at all. And like, you can learn something from everybody. Having that student mentality is everything. Consider the source and test it, but you should be willing to learn from everybody.
When I was doing commercial insurance, Be Obsessed or Be Average and Sell or Be Sold were two books that, from a motivation standpoint, changed the way I thought about things. I was no longer chasing 50 dials, 100 dials a day. I was just doing my job. And then by the end of the day, I'm like, holy cow, I had 112 dials. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't chasing the number. I was chasing the outcome of what that number was supposed to be. And I think that happens a lot in software now, especially in SaaS sales specifically. We're like, oh, we got to make 50 dials a day. And then people hit that 50 dials every day. You don't see anyone exceed 50 or like at a different number. It's always like, once I get to 50, I feel like I'm done. I checked out, and that's average to me. And so that's why I love those kind of concepts. I think from a motivational mindset, he's great. It's just the issue is a lot of it doesn't work in B2B. A lot of it's great for B2C, but I have no problem with the motivation and the mindset things, because it is true. That shit does work. You're totally right. It works.
It's tough, dude. And it's tough with what I've thought of, like, whenever I put out and they do borderline the best, but if I do like a fake role play where I'm the salesperson and the prospect, and I put it on TikTok and I put it on LinkedIn, those ones are also the most argued. This would never work for me. Mm-hmm. I'm doing enterprise sales. I'm doing government enterprise sales. This doesn't work. This does not apply. I couldn't apply any of this shit. Mm-hmm. And it makes me think, and it's like, man, they're partially right. And it's like, but you actually could use elements of it. You just can't use all of it. And that did lead me to start to think of like, well, nothing works for everyone. Yeah. But like, is there a format that I do that can enable you to do better at anything? Like whether it's gap selling, whether it's a certain enterprise, in-house baked plan where you can break it all down, get a look at it, and get better at it based on your mindset, how you look at the material, and how you consistently work to get better at it and break it down to the nth degree. And that's what led me to say, like, yeah, I think I've got something here. I think I have a book that would make a lot of sense and could help the most amount of people where it's applicable to everyone. And that's we're off to the races, dude. That's where the eggs are going in my basket for sure, man. They're going that way.
I'm excited about that. And you hit on something important. There are elements of it. That's what the frameworks are. Yeah, tactically, maybe the exact line I'm using does not work, but operationally, this is what your end goal should be. Similar, like you said, government, that's a lot of RFP processes, right? Well, use some freaking challenger and show them, why your price can be different, but it's better than the competitor without slandering the competitor, right? Where you live in this world where RFPs are we always think they're just going to choose the cheapest one. When I worked in logistics, we worked with a lot of government people who submitted RFPs. 9 times out of 10, we were more expensive. We still had a 30% close rate on our deals because we were able to leverage challenger to do that. Now, that's not going to work for everybody. It's all different, but the idea and the concept of how to get the focus off price, even in an RFP process, can be valuable, because sometimes you might win that. Some government contracts might say, screw it. No, we're just choosing the cheapest thing. Doesn't matter. We have to put this marker on the budget as we continue running the laundromat operation, right? The laundromat, as everybody calls it. But at the end of the day, we're still gonna, try our best to steer that focus off the price. Back to the onboarding conversation and kind of what you've built out and what you consult on. one interesting thing for sales reps in particular is the phone training, right? Phones are a big thing. They're not going anywhere. While we're going to do other things like video, email, and social touches and social selling,
Yep.
phones are always going to be important. It's been around for 100 years. We still book cold call meetings all the time. How do you
Yep.
prepare reps for phone calls in your onboarding process? And also, I'm curious to get some more information from you on how soon should reps be making first calls? How do you train them up on calls? And how important is product training versus problem training?
Yep. Um, Product training for an SDR is borderline not necessary. Because the old answer of the exact question that you just asked, we actually answer that in the demo. Let's get you, so like, that is, how often can you use it? Almost every time. And there's such thing as knowing too much about the product, where you are so excited that you learned this new thing, and then they ask you a question, and then you realize you just gave them a verbal demo without them seeing it. And now it's like the new dunk contest versus the old of my day, 80s and 90s. They didn't miss their dunks. Jordan did all those dunks. Vince Carter did all those dunks, and they didn't miss. So it was so exciting because you didn't know what they were going to do when they left when they left the floor and they got in the air. And it was so exciting. And nowadays they'll miss the dunk 3 times. By the time they make it, they're giving them 50s. I'm like, the fuck is this? I already knew what he was doing. I'm not excited anymore. This is at least a 30. So if you give them all of that up front on the SDR side, the level of excitement that can be created by an AE has not been enhanced, which means it only can be diminished. So I think when it comes to product versus problem, it's absolutely problem. And it's keep it short and simple. You want to qualify, but you know, as best you can, but you don't want to spend too much time there. And you don't want to give them too much where now it's like, well, I don't even need to show up to the demo. I already kind of know everything. This guy already told me everything. You know, I think there's definitely something to that. And that's kind of, that's my approach. As far as when they should get on the phone, how much role playing have you done is the first question. You know, are you confident that you put them on the phone, that you're going to get a good result and that they're not going to get absolutely blown out after 3 calls? The only way to know that answer is whether or not you've done the right amount of role play. And the answer to what's the right amount of role play is as much as it takes. That's the answer. You start role playing and you keep role playing with them until you're like, man, they know this shit front and back. That is one of the biggest things that is lacking nowadays in sales is the lack of practice. You know, you have NBA teams, you have NFL teams. These are the elite of the elite, multi-millionaires. They're practicing. They're out there practicing. How often are top salespeople practicing? How much do you actually spend practicing with your new reps? Is it that much? Well, we always say to SDRs, what makes a successful SDR? Look at your entire day and what you're spending your day on, and how much of it should you be spending on the stuff where the rubber meets the road, talking to prospects where you might be able to book a meeting. All right, well, as a sales leader, let's look at how you onboard somebody. How much time is spent on shit that they're barely going to use that does not lead to them booking a meeting? And how much time did you actually spend on making sure that they're as solid as possible on the phone? You spent half the time on email. Email's copy and paste. Email is, you don't have to be good at email to send an email. You better get good at the phone. Because one or two things is going to happen. If you never get good at the phone when you're new, it'll work, and your ceiling has already been defined. You're an email rep, and that's it. You're going to have a harder time becoming an AE. You're going to have a harder time being able to leave if you need to leave and work somewhere else. Or you spend the time and you get really good on the phone. And now everyone wants to work with you. You book an interview, you talk to them, you offer up a role play on the first call, and they're pumped and they're ready to hire you. They can't wait to move you over to an AE role because they know how good you sound. You know, you've got it on wax, you know, so to speak. You know, I think that's something. I made a post yesterday about how cold calling is not going to die, how it's like, you know, just stop delaying the inevitable and start calling. And that was also met with some resistance that I'm living in like the 80s. And it's like, no, the connect rates nowadays are still about 20%. Yeah, 20% to the CEO, of course not. If you're trying to call the CEO on the first call, you're probably at the wrong fucking job. You know, how often are you doing that? You're trying to work your way up there. You connect 50% or 20% of the time. 1 out of 5 people you can talk to. If you make enough dials, you're going to be able to build traction. You send an email, you get a reply. Now you got to have another 3 emails before you actually get what you wanted and get the information that you needed. You get that all done on the phone in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just, there's nothing that's come out from a software perspective that replicates that level of efficiency. People want to act like it's not efficient to cold call. It's not efficient to cold call if you don't know who the fuck your ideal customer is. It's very efficient to cold call if you know who they are. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that is, number one, whatever was already working before. And I made a video about this as well, how to stretch your ICP that works. You have to look at the deals that have already closed within the last 3 months or so. And what you're looking for on that side is, number one, how excited were they when they bought? Yeah. Listen to the recordings. Were they hyped up? Were they trying to give referrals out? Then add that to the list of maybes, right? Now go through them again and say, all right, how good was the product market fit? Was this like a square peg in a square hole? It was like perfect. Like, all right, cool. There's no custom work that we needed to do to get this deal across the line. No deal breakers. It's a great fit for this type of customer. Awesome. Leave those in the pile. The ones that aren't like that, take them out, throw them aside. And then the last one is, are they in an underserved market, like the region or the industry itself? So a good example is when I worked at PandaDoc, we figured out, Luke Ruffing and Jed Marley figured out that the government nonprofit segment was something where they had a huge need for digital signature. And if you look at DocuSign's website, they tell you the prospects they go after. Like, here's the ideal people that might want this. Government nonprofit is not on there. So what are the chances that our number one competitor or people like them are going to go after that? Because, by the way, the advice that I got from our old enterprise manager who didn't know shit said, hey, let's just look at DocuSign and we'll know who to prospect into. Okay, so you want to compete head to head on every fucking sale with DocuSign if you're PandaDoc. That's a horrible idea. Mm-hmm. How about going to the areas that they're not at and they meet that criteria? Dude, when that happened, we knocked the cover off the ball. Like, we whipped ass. We went way beyond what our targets were. We 10x'd revenue 1 year and 3x'd it the year after in a pandemic. And that's exactly what we did. You know, who knows what led me to saying that, but hopefully that was helpful, because I forgot where we started at.
No, we were talking about the phones and how to do the training. And I think you actually answered one of my next questions, which was going to be outside of onboarding and ramping to a standard plan. What can reps do to be successful? But I think you hit it on the mark. Go look at your closed won deals and understand sentiment of those calls. How excited were they? How much needed to be done to get them closed won? Did you have to bring in additional third-party integrators? Did you have to do custom work? How much of a square peg were you trying to fit in a round hole? And then also understand how underserved was their market. What are their options? And I love that you looked at that, because I think in sales a lot of times too, we do want to be our competitors. And if you were to 9 times out of 10, Troy, if you were to bring that concept, let's go see who DocuSign doesn't serve, I guarantee you another sales leader would say, well, there's a reason they don't serve them. And they would all be naysayers. But you said, screw that. You went after it. You made a bet on yourself. You bet big, and it worked out. Yeah. And I love that, because I don't think enough people are courageous to take those initiatives. And I love that you kind of avoided that doubt and those naysayers and found what worked. And that's super important, right? Testing and experimentation and creativity leads to progression. The closing thing I would like to hear from you and your opinion is, especially with the Zoom world that we live in, managers naturally seem to gravitate towards micromanagement, all these kinds of things. What is the best piece of advice on how a rep can manage up during their onboarding, training, and ramping phase, so that they don't fall victim to Zoom fatigue, one-on-one fatigue, and a lot of hand-holding that they may not need if they're comprehending the material correctly?
So the reality is, the actual answer, I could give you a whole bunch of advice on how to manage up. The reality is that lies with the VPs on the C level, and they need to wake the fuck up, and they need to get better context onto what they're rolling out onto the team and the repercussions, and take more stock into what their middle managers tell them, because a lot of blame goes to like that middle management level, and it's them having to adapt based on the whims of the people above them almost every time. You know, why are we doing so many one-on-ones? Because I have to. That's why. You know, well, are they comfortable managing up and telling people that? Because if not, like there's so many layers before anything that an individual contributor does is going to actually reach the person who actually crafts strategy, because it's rarely your director nowadays. I find that it usually came from the VP or even above that. And VPs in general do not like to change course on their their marquee thing that they bring in at every place that they work at for 2 years and then get fired. Like, so it's very tough to convince them of changing that. So for SDRs, the real advice is it probably sucks as much everywhere when you first get started. These things that you're going through are similar everywhere. Don't lose sight of the bag. Don't fucking lose sight of the reason why you started. All right. Hey, this is kind of hard. That's a good thing, because you're here to make money that most people don't make. Mm-hmm. So if it was easy, if it was perfect, which everyone's striving for perfection, some more realistically than others, then you wouldn't have the opportunity that you have right now, because everyone would know about it. Everyone would have figured out that it is a get rich quick scheme, which it's not, and they would be running through, and they'd have your job. You know, so you got to embrace it a little bit of like, yeah, I get excited when I see imperfection at a place, because if it was perfect, then they don't need me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and that's kind of a good thought for anyone, even if you're brand new, which is like, all right, like I can handle this. I can get the most out of everything that I'm doing. And the reality is, if I do these things and I appear to be high value, I lead the board in what I do, low maintenance, I'm not complaining. If I have an issue, I bring a solution with the issue. I don't just complain about it, you know, and you communicate the opportunity that you want. You got to do the first two before you can do the third one. You're going to be able to move up almost anywhere. And if you can't move up, I've got tips that can help you as well on TikTok and LinkedIn as far as what to do there. But the reality is there isn't too much that they really can do, right? What is the magic bullet that enables an individual contributor to change the approach to having a shitload of one-on-ones and having to do a forecast that everyone knows is BS? Not much. And the reality is, if you try, it might hurt you, or almost definitely hurt you more than help you. You're almost better off realizing that this is kind of an inevitability everywhere right now. It's up to upper management to realize they're demotivating their reps. And it's up to you as an individual contributor to realize if you're feeling this way, so is everyone else. And don't get it twisted. All of my friends, almost all of them, were my peers at one point in sales. They're also your competition, though. Bird and Magic were friends as well. If you're feeling that way, so is your competition. So if you adapt to it better, if you figure it out better, there's a very high chance that you're going to move out of the things that you hate a lot faster than they do. And that's really the best advice that I could give, because I think any other advice outside of that, unless it's something that I haven't heard of, is probably a bit of a fantasy, because it's probably not going to fucking change. You're just going to have to realize that you can use it to your advantage if you learn to embrace it a bit, is the reality. And that's not fair. It's not how it should go, but neither is real life, you know?
Yep. By the way, how great is Winning Time on HBO Max? I don't know if you've been watching that, but
I've actually waited. I've patiently waited so I could watch them all at once, but I've heard, you know, oh wait, Winning Time is not what I was going to say. I'm thinking Man in the Arena. Which one's Winning Time? I've heard the name.
Winning Time is the dramatization of the Lakers dynasty in the 1980s.
Yes. I haven't watched that. As a Celtics fan, it wasn't number one on my list to leap to. Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews. Like, heard that they really I made Jerry West look like ridiculous, and he's really pissed about it. Like, which is a shame. I mean, the dude's the logo. Yeah, it's wild how those biopics and things like that. Like, it's like, yeah, but we also wanted to stretch the truth. It's like, all right, cool. Just wrecking someone's legacy for the sake of entertainment is what you're doing, right? Like, you're admitting that, because anyone who watches it, whether it's entertainment or not, is immediately going to assume that that's kind of the truth, you know? Yeah. And I haven't watched a single episode, but I've heard that like it's kind of rough, you know, and they really turn them into cartoons, and it's like, I don't know. don't know if I'm that much of a fan of that.
It makes
These dudes
for
really
great
put in a
TV.
lot to create that legacy. Yeah.
Makes for great TV, but they do put that disclaimer at the end of every episode. That's the first thing they do, that some of these events or how they occurred might have been changed for dramatic effect. And it's like, oh, Jesus.
Do they do it? They do it at the end?
At the end of every episode, they put that disclaimer before they even roll the credits.
That's funny. It's at the end instead of the start.
Well, yeah, I mean, it takes away from the effect of the intro of the episode, but it is very interesing. And I think that's
it's like a retraction. Like
everything you just saw might not be real.
Yeah.
It does add for some fun on the episode, though, to be able to go and do a little bit of independent research and like read, was Dr. Buss really this awful of a person? You know what I mean? Like, was this really the way he conducted himself? But
big thing they should have put out there, man, is the fact that the Los Angeles Lakers, do not have 17 rings.
Yeah.
The Minneapolis Lakers have like 4 of those. And I'm going to need that enforced. As a reminder that the Boston Celtics have 17 rings. And someone needs to figure that out ASAP and get that handled.
I love it. Well, Troy, I know we're at time here. I appreciate the episode. I appreciate the candor. I think a lot of good takeaways here. Anybody who's listening, who's interested, wants to connect with you in various ways. We called out some of those: TikTok and LinkedIn. Tell them where they can find you at. How can they locate you?
Yeah. So on LinkedIn, Troy Barter. YouTube, same thing. TikTok, it's Troy Barter Sales. If you search my name, the reality is, like, I'm on Instagram too. Like, LinkedIn and TikTok are kind of the only places. Like LinkedIn, I connect with everybody. You connect with me, you have a question. If it's a specific, like, one question, I usually get back to people within the day. And then TikTok, I put more content on TikTok than LinkedIn. LinkedIn is just regurgitated versions of my TikToks at this point.
Sweet. And for those of you interested in more Sales RX podcast episodes, feel free to check out our LinkedIn page, connect with us, click the link in the show notes for more resources like our SDR to AE program, VIP referrals to the Pavilion community, whether you're an SDR, AE, or even a senior executive and want to join the community. Feel free to check those resources out at your will. And until the next one, we will catch you all later. Thanks for your time, Troy.
Appreciate it, man.